Welcome to Under the Skin with Russell Brand. My guest today is Andy Puddicombe, the accomplished presenter and writer, and is the co-founder and voice of the Headspace app. In his early 20s, midway through a university degree in sports science, Andy made the unexpected decision to travel to the Himalayas to study meditation instead. It was the beginning of a 10-year journey which took him around the world, culminating with ordination as a Tibetan Buddhist monk in northern India. His transition back to normal life in 2004 saw him training briefly at Moscow State Circus before returning to London to complete a degree in circus arts with the Conservatoire of Dance and Drama, whilst drawing up the early plans for what was later to become Headspace. Welcome, Andy, to Under the Skin.
Thanks, Russell.
Even though Under the Skin in this instance is taking place in your studio where you actually...
It is. Welcome to Headspace.
Thank you very much. It's very generous of you to... We've never done this before on Under the Skin. We've always recorded it, in various places in London. We're in Los Angeles now. We're in one of the facilities of Headspace. And it's wonderful to be here. The reason I was strongly motivated to meet you was because people kept mentioning Headspace in Under the Skin. Ed Stafford, the survival expert, and I call him the grunge Bear Grylls. Not that I don't love Bear Grylls, the straight standard Bear Grylls vanilla. I love that guy too. But Ed Stafford, he's like the Nirvana version. He loves Headspace. So more and more people were mentioning Headspace to me. And I thought, I'm going to have to meet the people that are Headspace.
Well, thanks for coming in.
And
by the
compelled.
way, this place you're very welcome if you're in LA.
It's lovely to hear your voice. Thank you very much. I'll take you up on that. Thank you. That's really very generous of you. Now, what has defined Headspace thus far, even though I know it's been a 10-year journey, is it seems to me, and I use the app myself, that you are making meditation accessible. Yeah. It's fun, colloquial.
Hopefully.
I think you are. I love the little animation videos. I don't know what the reference points are for those creatures. I don't know quite what they are, but I like them. I love your tone. I was talking to someone, I'm over here acting at the moment, and I was talking to another actor on set, and he was talking about meditation and challenges that he faces. I goes, you want to do Headspace, mate? Like it's just like a British bloke going, all right, sit down. Remember, you don't need to shut your eyes yet, and just relax. It's not complicated. Remember, hopefully you've watched the video. If you haven't, you might want to watch that now. Like, and I sort of like what I feel like part of what I've been trying to do myself is to make not meditation because I'm not qualified to bring it to people, but certainly the conversation around spirituality. I've wanted to make it more accessible. Tell me how this journey began for you.
The journey into meditation or Headspace more specifically?
I think initially Headspace. How come you went, I'm going to set up an app and popularise meditation? How have you done this?
Yeah, well, it's important to say, so I'm a co-founder, so the other co-founder, Rich Pearson. So very, very dear friend now, and this was something that we came up with together. And we've had an amazing team of people. And also I love so much, like love and support from people along the way. I think
you're a grateful person because you're the real deal, aren't you? You're a monk. So you're not ever going to go,
I was a monk,
I had this brilliant idea of Headspace and I'm going to smash it. You're obviously a totally humble person because you're tuned into the limitless. But
it's also the truth as well.
No,
like,
cool. How did you meet Rich?
Yeah, so I left... I left the monastery and decided to start teaching. I was doing one-to-one in a clinic back in London. So this was, we'll look at the circus thing later. But kind of after the circus, I was kind of, okay, I knew kind of the language that I wanted to use, and I knew by then what techniques I kind of felt would work outside of them.
Why did you even feel compelled to do that, Andy? Why did you think, I want to popularise meditation? What was the sense that you had that it was necessary?
This is more tricky because it wasn't like a plan. So in the same way, people ask, why did you go away and become a monk? I felt an overwhelming sense that was what I had to do, and I wasn't able to necessarily put it into words, and I didn't come up with a list of pros and cons of being a monk and not being a monk. In the same way, when I left the monastery, I guess if it's helpful to take a step back, and when I was teaching meditation, so I'd the monastery had asked me to teach at a meditation center in Moscow, and I ended up living there for just over 4 years, 4.5 years. And I would see different types of people. And I'd often get expats coming along, and they really wanted to learn meditation, and they really wanted the benefits of meditation, but they didn't necessarily want to adopt a faith. They didn't necessarily want to chat to a guy in robes and to come into this kind of place where there was a lot of ritual and tradition. So that was, I think, the beginning of me thinking like, well, there's this need, and what's more important to me? Is it teaching meditation or is it being a monk? And I felt very strongly that teaching meditation was more useful, and that I could present it in a way that it didn't matter whether I was wearing a shirt and tie or whether I was wearing kind of robes. So that was the beginning, I would say.
What's the best thing about being a monk?
Strange as it may sound, not having anything, because there's nothing to worry about. So you
freedom.
Freedom. You give away. I mean, which is strange because you're living within four walls, and it's very kind of institutionalized in some ways. But within that, there is freedoms from within, and so there is an inner feeling of freedom. And you don't have to achieve anything. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to worry about losing anything. You own nothing. There's a real sense of freedom in that.
In your case, it was a Tibetan monastery in the Himalayas. Is that correct?
So it was. I started in Himalayas, and then I went to Burma and trained in a Burmese monastery, and then eventually I ended up kind of going back to the Tibetan monastery and doing 5 years in the Tibetan tradition. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And the relationship with the guru or teacher, it's kind of a sacred thing, isn't it? Who is your teacher?
It is. So I think there are different types of teachers along the way. So there are more kind of instructor kind of type teachers. They're people who they're the real deal. They've put in the time and they've done it, but they're maybe not kind of considered sort of like as a guru or something like that. And someone who was incredibly important in my own personal kind of journey was he's an Irishman called Donald. And Donald was a real deal. Like he trained. I think he did just over 12 years in retreat, in long-term retreat.
Where did you encounter him, and where had he done them 12 years?
So he did 12 years. He was on his way to the Himalayas, and he stopped off at a monastery, a Tibetan monastery in Scotland, which is back in the 60s. It had just opened, it had just started, and the abbot of the monastery persuaded him to stay and do a 6-month retreat rather than go to India. And he finished the 6-month retreat, and they said, well, look, we're just about to start the first 3.5-year retreat. Would you, it's the first one in the West that's kind of ever happened. The Tibetans have this 3.5-year retreat. Would you like to do it? And yeah, okay, he's a fairly easy kind of going guy. And he was like, yeah, sure, I'll try it. And so he did that one, and then he did another one, and then he did another one. And by the time I met him, he'd left the monastery. He was never a monk, so he was in that, he went through that process, but he did it as a lay person. And by the time I met him, he was in Moscow, and that was my main kind of reason for going out to Moscow, was to meet him and train with him. And
you wanted to meet him?
I really wanted to meet him.
Why did you want to?
I'd met the abbot of the monastery in Scotland. I'd gone back there, and a friend invited me along. And I remember just seeing the picture of this guy, and it said that he was at the Moscow kind of center, and there was something about him which resonated, and I felt really strongly that there was something for me to better understand and learn. And because he'd gone through that journey, he'd come to it as a Westerner. My understanding of it is that he'd sort of transcended the tradition. So he was no longer kind of stuck with the words and the concepts and the frameworks, and so he kind of operated outside of that, which allowed him to communicate in a way which just struck a chord, which I'd never really kind of experienced before, because I'd always been in foreign monasteries where it was, this is how it is and it's like this, and always the same language was used. And so he kind of cut through that for me and helped me see it in a really different way, I think.
But somehow that's obviously significant as you go on along with your partner and your team to become the founder of Headspace, that a significant mentor for you was someone that didn't use the conventional traditional lexicon, but in fact colloquially taught meditation, which is precisely what Headspace does now for 20 million users. So I can see why he would be a significant figure. But it also seems significant to me, Andy, that the impulse to connect with this guy seemed very intuitive, very instinctive. What's that about, do you think?
Yeah. I think maybe I'm just kind of rash. Like I tend to kind of move from instinct, I would say, or I tend not to overthink things. So whether it was kind of going away and becoming a monk, that felt like just so intuitively the right thing to do. I did it, and in the same...
When did you do it? What was that? I mean, you're from Bristol in England, aren't you? You're just a bloke from Bristol in England.
That's it.
Suddenly you're a monk in the Himalayas. Then there's a bit where you're nearly in the circus. My mate Gareth, who produces the show, says his biography sounds like a lie that you'd make up to impress a girl.
Do you know...
Yeah, I was a monk for a while, then I was in the circus, then I was an assassin for a couple of weeks.
They removed that part from the secret,
it's like Kevin Keegan. It's like a weird, mad, exotic life.
It does sound bizarre. I think if you look at it as there's no way of explaining away the monk to circus, monk to clown bit. But basically, up until the age of 21, I competed in gymnastics. So kind of I had that acrobatic kind of background. I then went to become a monk, and for 10 years I did no exercise. And that was something that I really, really missed. So as soon as I had the opportunity, you can't exercise as a monk. So as soon as I finished being a monk,
why?
Why
so you're always meditating all day.
That's it. Just sitting around with your eyes closed, not doing anything.
They're layabouts.
Yeah, exactly. So and I was desperate to kind of go back and do that. So that was the first thing I did when I stopped being a monk. And so I went back to doing acrobatics and stuff, and I transitioned.
You do come across a bit of an extremist, mate. 1 minute you're in Bristol, next minute you're a monk, and I'm going to be in a circus now.
It sounds like that.
I suppose there's focus and concentration. One of the things it seems like you must have, and also as I say, when I listen to you on Headspace, it's interesting to hear you say other stuff. Like it's like you must have a good relationship with your inner life. Concentration and focus for an acrobat, concentration and focus for a gymnast, concentration and focus and an aspect, one might say, of meditation. So you pursued the monastic path. Yeah. We briefly spoke upstairs, and like monastic life is determined by structure, isn't it? You get up at a certain time, you eat certain things, and evidently you're not allowed to do any bloody exercise. I now know. So, like, how long did you live that life?
So I lived it on and off. So I started as a lay person in northern India, and then I went and became a novice monk. So I moved to Burma. And then I went on to become a monk in Tibetan tradition. So it was over a period of 10 years.
10 years. And these transitions, are they marked by ceremony and commitment? What are these transitions? How are they marcated?
Some are, yeah. I think when you become a novice monk, there's a ceremony, and I think it becomes a bit more formal as you become a fully ordained monk. So it was. I didn't bring the pictures are upstairs, but
how different are you going to look? You've got a shaved head now.
I mean, it's different.
Is it? Did you look? Because when I first met you just then, I thought, oh yeah, he's a monk. Like I sort of like people have got a vibe. Like I've tried, like
Is that because you knew though? Because you knew I used to be.
Probably, yeah. Probably there was confirmation bias, but also there was the sense my background in addiction, you sense when people with drug addicts, they're not present. Even whatever type of drug it is, they think mostly their life when they're not taking drugs is just the thing that they have to deal with in order to get back to drugs. Now, with spiritual meditation people, the impact it has on me is it makes me vibrate a bit, or I don't know, it heats me up. Something about it I like. And I remember when I was a little kid, well, not a little kid, I was 27. So when I was 27, I met this geezer that was a sort of hardcore Swami, Radhanath Swami. He's from the Hare Krishna sect, right? And when I met him, I got a real buzz off it. It was like meeting a beautiful woman, actually. It was like, I was like, oh God, I really want to impress him. I liked him a lot. I got all sort of excited, and I recognised. And then when you read Autobiography of a Yogi, like when Yogananda talks about his guru, it's great love, great passion.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, if I think, you were talking just now about kind of gurus and stuff, and I was start off with teacher. If I think about sort of the first time I met who I would consider to be sort of like guru type sort of status.
Is that Irish geezer, Donald?
No, it's not. It's a chap called His Holiness the Karmapa. And who escaped from Tibet when he was 17 years old.
Because of what, Chinese occupation?
Yeah, and I met him back in, there was like quite a serious threat to his life, so I met him back, I don't know, late 1990s, something like that. And I remember I knew nothing about him, and the first time I met him, I can only describe that moment as completely limitless in nature, and whether you define limitless by love, by space, by time, there was a feeling of connection which I had never experienced up until that kind of point. And it was without any of the kind of, as I say, the baggage of association or anything else. I didn't really kind of know much about him. He was 17 years old. So
he was like a kid.
he was a kid. He was 17, but he could have been 80 or 90 years old. There was something about him which was completely timeless, ageless. And that for me was the beginning of a very different kind of journey into meditation, I would say.
What happened to you there in retrospect?
I think it shattered a lot of kind of illusions I might have had, but it was a beginning of sort of, I guess, a journey of devotion as well. And I think devotion is often kind of talked about in different ways. I'm not talking about a blind devotion, but a real sense of something being, and it was personified by that person, but it wasn't really about that person. It was something kind of bigger, and yet there was a direction for that. Again, whether you think of it as devotion or love or whatever, it felt like it had a very definite sort of direction and purpose. So I felt just a connection that I'd never experienced before.
Inescapably, Andy, we are talking about quite profound ideas, profound and powerful energies that somewhat supersede the colloquial and secularized world of the Headspace app, which, I think is a brilliant tool. But part of the compromise that's continually made, when reaching out to what we would say, what you would call secular people or non-religious people or people that aren't spiritual, you continually sort of going, it's just a thing, just to help you relax, just make you more effective at work, right? Then how do we fit this together with the stuff that I'm kind of into, which is like you meet a 7-year-old kid that's like the golden child that's conveying some limitless infinite wisdom that makes his personage irrelevant, like you sense God in someone, or, and again, that's a complicated word, but the limitless, to use your term.
Yeah.
How do we ally that with the needs of Headspace? Is it because you look at them as separate things, or what?
I really don't, actually. I think it's been a journey that has just kind of evolved, and I feel like to suggest it's gone full circle suggests that something has been achieved, and I don't mean it in that way. I mean simply I've been on a journey where I started off with one particular kind of language and a way of kind of looking at the world and thinking about things. I went through another kind of period where I was using different language and looking at the world in a different kind of way, and then I came back to a situation where I'm using the old language but to kind of refer back to that journey. And for me, they're not different. And I personally, I think the danger of kind of having any kind of labels like normal people or spiritual people, I think that it's defined, that the essence is defined by being present. And I think as soon as we take on the label of being spiritual or non-spiritual, then we've stepped away from the essence that we're trying to kind of describe. So I don't feel like there's a difference. There's definitely, we're talking about stuff using different, I wouldn't talk about this kind of in the app, because I don't feel like it's the most helpful, most relevant thing for the person coming to the app. But as we kind of dig a bit deeper, I think, it is relevant to my personal kind of journey.
Of course.
And all of that informs kind of what has gone into the app. Nothing in the app is like my own idea. Nothing is kind of being invented by me. It's really me just kind of taking other people's wisdom and trying to kind of bring it together in a way that feels right for people like us, right, who don't live in a monastery.
Of course, yes. There is no, it doesn't in any way undermine or compromise the content of the app to say that someone that's been a monk for 10 years is going to have had different experiences than someone who's just picking up their phone and going, I think I won't mind 10 minutes where I'm not worrying about my job or whatever it is. That's obviously distinct. It's obviously something that you've dedicated a great deal of exploration toward, and there's many things I'm fascinated about here, mate, because like when we talk about the devotion that is adhered within the guru student system, when you talk about the discipline and structures that were prevalent in your monastic life, it is inescapable that these models have been extricated from Western life as we know it.
Yeah.
So it must be a huge challenge.
It is, and I, if in a perfect kind of scenario, like maybe people, and it's interesting. People sometimes come into the app and they get to a point where they say, actually, I really, where did you train? Where did you do retreat? I actually kind of want to go and investigate kind of that a little bit more, So the people who kind of follow on and go down that route, and so sometimes I do feel like, yes, there is a journey that can be delivered through the app, but it's one part of the journey, and maybe at some stage some people will want to go off and explore that, outside of the app as well.
Yes, that it's a departure point. It's a good way of learning meditation. But another one of the things that must be significant, and it's something that we've touched upon already, is the use of language. Like, the words don't really, we were talking before, Andy, about how as soon as you start talking about concepts, it becomes complicated. It becomes complicated because we're dealing with something somewhat intangible.
Yeah, I genuinely feel like the more we talk about meditation, the further we move away from the experience. So we could just sit here and not say anything for now, but at the same time, like, you got to say something. And so I genuinely feel like that there has to be some kind of conversation, and there has to be signposts, and there has to be guidance. There's an old Pali kind of term, I think it's Kalana Mitaya, which is,
I believe that's from the Lion King.
a common.
Yes, that's Pumbaa. Yeah, isn't it, I believe who's the warthog.
That's right, the Pali warthog. And so I think there's.
What does it mean, that phrase?
It means trusted friend, or kind of like trusted guide, and for me that's the role. Like, it's how to be kind of rather than kind of laying on concepts and saying you should think in a certain way or you should live in a certain way. It's more kind of, okay, look, I went away and did this thing, and I found it really helpful. Maybe I've done a little bit more than some other people, a little bit less than some other people, but I'm really happy to be like a trusted guide and to use that experience and to try to find a language that worked for me, and my hope is that it works for others as well.
It is working. You're definitely doing it really brilliantly. That's how come I'm here interviewing you. I think is you've cracked it. Now, like, one of the great lies of our time, it seems to me, is the idea that personal liberty is freedom, and that personal liberty means that we can be who we want to be. But I'm starting to understand that is not the case, that there is no such thing as a vacuum. There is no such thing as a sort of an uninfluenced freedom. Yeah. What we have is, I think we live in an extremist consumerist culture, that our time is deeply influenced by ideologies so all-pervasive that we can't see them because they are everything. It would be like trying to identify individual molecules of oxygen or whatever. So, like, without opposing structures, without alternative structures, our role in civilization, our role in society becomes to consume. We consume. We don't know how to look at the world differently. We consume our politics. We consume our news. We have show business politicians now. So there is a great necessity for spirituality to get a foothold in contemporary life. Technology is going to be part of it. In a way, Headspace is a perfect product. Are you surprised by the way that it's gone, by the place that you found yourself?
I'm not surprised that people have warmed to the idea of practicing meditation. I think it's timeless. I think it's universal. It's been around for thousands of years. The need, people experienced anxiety and sadness and anger back then, there's in the same way that they do now. I think the difference, as you say, now that it's almost like there's a bit of a squeeze kind of, and that we're all feeling that squeeze, feeling more overwhelmed by all those things. So I think, it's perhaps no surprise that more than ever people are looking for that. My only concern about it is that in the sense of urgency and need, that it becomes, in people's minds at least, a fix. Rather, so it's like how I'm feeling stressed. How do I fix that? I'm not sleeping. How do I fix that? Rather than, okay, how do I understand my life or my mind in relationship to stress or in relationship to sleep? And that, meditation is about understanding. It's not about fixing something or changing something. So I feel like that's a very delicate kind of dance and balance that we're all kind of engaged in. It's like how to, on the one hand, offer people the aspirin because they have a headache and we should treat the headache, and at the same time say, well, it's not about treating the symptom, it's about looking at and understanding the underlying cause.
Does it have the potential to be extremely dangerous and revolutionary, some of these ideas, in that it seems to me that the natural endpoint is a kind of throwing off the shackles of our contemporary way of life, beyond even the external structures, and perhaps more importantly, the internal structures that make us victim to those external ones. If people start to say, well, there's more to life than consuming, there's more to life than what I do for a job, what happens if communities start forming around different ideas? What happens then?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really interesting idea, I think that's quite an exciting idea. And I don't think the difference is I don't think it has to be this or that. I don't think it has to be so kind of extreme. I personally feel like it's quite possible to live in the world with the world as it is, but to, at the same time, to do that with a sense of awareness and compassion. And, that means that we're taking responsibility for living the way that we choose to live. And perhaps, as a result, there are some ripples from that, hopefully, that other people around us kind of benefit from. And maybe even some of those people might kind of think, you know what, maybe I'll do a little bit of that. So rather than it being sort of coercive in nature or any kind of sense of pushing, it's more just taking responsibility for one's own sanity and health and relationships, and then kind of seeing what happens as a result.
I think you're quite right about that, because I was thinking just as you spoke that we are different men, you and I, and that a monk by nature is. It seems that journey is about, there is some distinction, some discretion, some separation, monastery. I think about that sometimes. Yeah. When I was young, when I met that man, as a matter of fact, I said, do you think I should become a monk?
Yeah, did you think?
He laughed at me when I said it. He laughed at the idea. And that was then, Yeah. But I sometimes wish that I were. I sometimes wish that there were robes that denoted what my position is in the world. That I don't believe in this. This is not who I am, and I don't want to talk about those things. But but because I am a person that has found flesh very, very appealing and corrupting. I've found drugs very, very engaging. I like senses. I like sensuality. I like the body. Yeah. So I've had to come to meditation, yoga, spirituality with a gun to my head, pretty much.
Well, look, it's worth saying. One, I've not always been a monk. So there were 20,
he was an acrobat for a bit.
21
years, lunatic biography.
21 years when I wasn't a monk, and look, and I haven't been a monk now for 12 years, and I have a wife and I have kids, and so it's in the same. It might be different, but in the same way, it's not that I'm unaffected by those things. I was drawn to my wife because she was beautiful, and I found her beautiful, and so. I don't know if that's what you're kind of talking about, but I suppose it seems that you are, when you answered that question about me saying, because what I see when people talk about spirituality, I believe it is that a connection to the sort of, even take it whether it's at the extreme end of being in a monastery somewhere in Tibet or listening to a Headspace app. We're talking about a truthful and authentic relationship with the self, in inverted commas, that brings about peace. Now, for me, there's a deep truth in that. And the more people that have access to that deep truth, it's likely that would have limitless repercussions and would bring about a lot of change. And I feel that I agree with you, Andy, that we can't start sort of waving flags and bashing down doors, and there's nothing more ridiculous than when you read of conflict in Buddhist countries and you feel what's going on? You've missed the point. But I suppose any religion, really. Any religion. It's you've missed the point. Yeah.
But I wonder about expansionism. I wonder about evangelicism, because I feel that there are ideas that need to be spread. I don't think within the limited conversation of contemporary politics a solution will be found. I think that they're just permutations and versions of each other. I think most people think that. I think we're experiencing a time of grotesqueness, of nostalgia, ethno-nationalism, old ideas, this weird twitching, flinching dinosaur corpse thing with a wig on. It's like a peculiar time. And I feel that precisely the solution is to get in touch with essence as you described it, Andy. And And I feel that, you are doing this thing that means that 20 million people are meditating now, and it's you that's doing it, and it's good it's good and apposite and perfect and necessary that you are a man that lived as a monk for 10 years and now lives a lay person life, because that means that there is authenticity. Because if it was me doing it, it'd be like, hang on a minute, let's get an app together for meditation. The time is right. Like you're doing it, but
there's a few people out there doing it.
I bet there are. I bet there are. But like, this is authentic and truthful, and in spite of the fact that there's like comfortable animation and it's well put together, and it's when you showed me that room that you do the broadcasting, I thought, oh, that is like a chapel. It's silent, it's dark, it's sacred.
Yeah, and I think like any place, it's not defined by how it looks. It's a recording studio, but I think the feeling kind of in there is, I just think it's the same as anything, right? Like if we go to work in a particular kind of space, every space has its own kind of feeling, and we don't even have to be into that sort of stuff, that kind of language or vocabulary to even experience that. We go to one place and we experience one kind of feeling. We go to another place, it's a different kind of feeling. Maybe we walk into a room with one person, they're angry. We don't even talk to them, but we know that they're angry. There's a feeling kind of in the room. So this kind of stuff exists, even if we just talk about it in that sort of way. So I think that's what's interesting, that we don't necessarily have to go out there and talk about it. We can, and I think it's exciting, and it's good that some people do, especially within some kind of realms. But specific to meditation, I feel like if each and every one of us takes on that responsibility to simply to practice, then over time that has an exponential kind of effect, because the feeling is such that it starts to impact the lives of the people around us.
You're right. I think I spoke to David Lynch once about meditation and about potentially having confrontations with people on air, like going on TV shows and thinking, I'm going to have to advocate for meditation.
Right.
And he says, well, there's no point in doing that, really. Just tell them, learn to meditate, and it will change. It will change. It's a practice. It's something that alters your consciousness. Suddenly I become aware that yesterday, again, when I was on that TV set, I was talking to kids that are like, I guess 19 years old, these beautiful young men, and I'm struck by how bright and brilliant and ready and different they seem. And I wonder if this is some perennial quality of youth, or if young people are changing now, if people are ready, if there can be some impersonal quality to that God, man, Buddha kid you met, then perhaps there are sort of meteorological spirits travelling through us.
I think there's a change, right? There is a shift.
Feels like it.
I do think, and definitely, we work a lot with kids and teenagers with learning meditation, and I do feel like.
Do you? What do you mean by that? You work a lot with kids?
So going into schools, developing programs for specifically sort of meditation for children. It's in app for them to do with their parents, or we've done work in schools as well, with the intention that it becomes part of the school kind of curriculum. And my feeling is that they have watched and learnt kind of from our experiences, and they want something different.
Yeah.
And there's a real kind of readiness, and as you say, like a passion about that. And I feel like as much as people kind of give kids a really kind of tough time, I actually feel they're coming through. Yes, they're challenged by all the distractions of digital and everything else, but I actually feel like they're more altruistic in nature, more socially minded than I've seen in a long time, certainly our generation.
What do you does meditation work for you? Right, we mentioned that you're a married man, you've got kids, you've been through like sort of you've had quite a difficult life, and you've lost a lot of people that you've loved. I don't
know if it's more difficult than anyone else's life, but definitely there are some key things that have happened that have influenced my own journey.
Does it work? The spiritual life, does it work? Is it effective when it comes to the crunch, when the pain comes, when the divorce comes, when people die, when people leave you, when you lose control of life and its circumstances? Do you say to people, this works, this way of life?
Can you just, what do you mean by work?
Does it help with pain and misery and sadness and despair and loneliness and agony and anguish? Normal life.
My wife's listening. No, look, I think it.
Yeah, I'm not equating your wife with those words. I just mean that my sort of.
I know what you mean.
I'll tell you why. It's because a question that Gareth's written, actually. It's normally
Yeah.
Gareth's here doing these things
Right.
with me. I'm not so generous as you, where you go, oh, like Rich, he set up me. I just take the credit. That's my function in life, is to take credit. But like one of the questions he sort of pointed out, he goes, he's seen like that my way of dealing with life was, I'm going to take a lot of drugs.
Yeah,
I'm going to do I'm going to do external things. I'm going to get involved in the material world. Whereas evidently what you did is you went, I'm going to find another way, another path.
And I did, and I think it's so circumstantial. I look in another town, with another set of friends. I just think it was for all of us. It's so specific to that time and that place and that environment. Yes, kind of. I'd had meditation in my background. Like I'd grown up kind of doing it and stuff with my mum, and so that was there in the background. But definitely to begin with, I think my immediate reaction was one, to go to the pub with everyone else, and then kind of I'd probably spent a few years of doing that and not really seeing a shift in how I felt. So I went away and I became a student and did all the things that students do, and it was great fun. But I never felt that I had any kind of liberation beyond the sense of, temporary freedom that I might have had for a few hours on a night time. The next day, you wake up. And so I never felt that deep sense of fulfillment that I felt was possible.
Work straight away. Because
Yeah.
I felt that, and then I went, oh, you better do it all of the time to stop this moment of reflection ever happening.
Well, mine was maybe less extreme.
Just kill that moment of reflection.
Yeah.
That guy has got to go.
Yeah, maybe I don't know.
Do you get angry still? Do you get angry?
Of course.
What happens? What do you do if you feel angry?
I mean, I tend not to run around kind of ranting and raving at people. I don't think it manifests like that. But, I have a 3.5-year-old son and an 8-month-old baby, and we don't sleep very much in the house. So it's kind of inevitable at some stage that anger kind of comes up. And as much as possible, it's trying to bring the practice to life, which is to witness it and not to become the anger, but to notice that anger is kind of present. And sometimes I miss it, as in I don't see it straight away, and so I'm already kind of on my son going, what did you just do that? Oh yeah, that's anger. Okay.
Sometimes you might want to jump on one of those passing cars, but just remember we're at the side of the road. Right, yeah, because that's what, like, thinking about it when we came, we're like here, me and my wife, we were like, the first couple of nights, the baby's jet lagged, we're jet lagged, and I can remember it being like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, just going, look, we're going to have to do something because this depression, I think this is wrong. Life's not meant to be like this. And my wife went, no, look, we're jet lagged.
Yeah.
Like, because I think I attach very quickly to phenomena and states of mind. So I need meditation. I need to be able to go, oh, okay, this is just, you are not this feeling of anger. You are not this fear. The fear will pass and you will be present. Now, like, I still feel like, even though it's 15 years since I've taken drugs or drunk, I still feel like I'm subject to fear in a very powerful way. Like, I can be hit with fear that demands activity. It's like, I've got to have to do something. I'm feeling this feeling. Right, smash everything up, run. So it's very hard to just go, okay, just breathe in. So, but you're saying, because like the meditative practice that you have, and of course yours is a very particular and thorough version, actually is applicable in situations where the 3.5-year-old's kicking off or the missus is kicking off.
I actually think that any meditation practice which isn't applicable to daily life, I kind of wonder what's the point a little bit, because I don't think any of us,
Right, it's not applicable in daily life, but fuck it then.
Exactly. So people sit for 10 minutes and do the meditate. What about the other 23 hours and 50 minutes in the day? So I feel like there has to be a way of bringing that. I just see it as, look, if we can remove ourselves from the madness of our lives for long enough to get familiar with what it means to be present, what it means to be open and curious and loving, compassionate, then we can start to bring those qualities back into our everyday life. And it's an ongoing kind of training. And I love that back and forth, where, you notice, oh, wow, actually, yeah, that still kind of happens. Okay, you go back to your meditation, and over time that kind of, it strengthens where meditation is no longer separate from your life. Meditation is simply a time within your life or within your day when you pause and close your eyes?
That makes sense. This thing I've been thinking about lately, like the relationship between the word whole and the word holy, that there is a sort of becomes an identifiable wholeness to your life, meaning that if I'm out on my own and I feel like an attractive person pays me attention,
Yeah.
I don't think, oh, brilliant, I'm just this guy now. I go, no,
Yeah.
no, I'm the guy that's got the wife and the child. You are
Right.
always that. You are a complete person.
Yeah.
You don't compartmentalize yourself off into oh, in this corner of my life I get
Right.
away with this. This is the corner of my
Yeah.
life where I do that. No, it is one thing. There is
Yeah.
one thing. There are completeness. And you think that meditation creates some sort of connection, some foundation, some essence.
Yeah, no question. You know, we were chatting about this. You met Ash, you know, just before we came here, an old buddy,
Yeah, he's someone you work
old buddy
with.
of mine.
I
Yeah,
like him.
someone I work. He's a lovely guy, and you know, we grew up together, and we were just chatting kind of about this idea of connection, and he was saying kind of when did you first kind of really feel that, you know, and I still remember kind of being in the monastery and something kind of just melting away where I no longer felt that extreme sense of self, like a sense, and again, I'm not suggesting for a moment that, you know, enlightenment or anything like this, but just a glimpse perhaps of what it meant not to feel kind of isolated or separate from the world. And in that moment, there wasn't a person to be separate from everything. There was only whole, and there wasn't even anyone there to experience and to think about it. Is this the whole or is it not? There's simply that was all that existed.
Oh, wicked.
And I feel like that was look, it's just an experience, and those come and go, and it all depends on how stable those experiences are and how much kind of they become a part of our lives. For me, it was quite temporary, but I do feel like there was something kind of in that which really spoke to a different way of viewing the world.
You see Buddha and Jesus and that kid, that 17-year-old God man you met, them cats, do you think they're living there? You think that they're in that state all the time?
Look, it seems to be, you know, there was there's one other if I can. So there was another monastery that I went to visit. So there's this
You're like on a monastery crawl.
there's pretty much.
About a monastery. Let me in. I want to transcend. You've had enough transcendence. Get out. Go back to your wife. I haven't got a wife.
Monastery golf. It was there's a kind of an elite troupe of kind of meditators, right? So they within this tradition they get picked
Which
out.
Which tradition?
So it's the Kagyu school. So there are four main ones in Tibet. Kagyu is one of the four.
What's Dalai Lama?
He's Gelugpa. And he's very well known, obviously because of his just transcendent wisdom and compassion. But he was also the head of government for a long time, and sort of. Although he's not the head of all four schools, he's probably better known in the West than anyone else. And in this monastery, they pull the kids out pretty young, and obviously the kids have to want to do it. They have to show a real kind of what's the word? Like a lot of potential in meditation. The families have to be on board as well, and they're picked out. And from about the age of 10 or 11, they're in strict retreat. They never go outside. They never see anyone, speak to anyone or anything. And we were invited to this monastery, and it's very, very rare to meet anyone from that thing. And the guy who ran it he lived above the monastery. And I was with this chap, Donald, and I think because I was with this chap, Donald, we were invited to go and see him. And going into that room, I went in there were four of us that went in. Again, that is someone I would say who was absolutely living that sense of wholeness. I don't believe there was an ounce of separation kind of left in him. He was there, but he wasn't there. Like there was nothing but a presence of, again, awareness, compassion, openness, love, whatever you want to kind of call it or define it. There was someone there, but there was nobody there.
Yeah.
And I felt like he had completely transcended self. So that was his existence.
It's like the realization that your biographical identity and your sort of primal motivations, your lust, your jealousy, fear, or even personal love, are temporal interpretations. And if your identification with the interpreter, the witness, the experiencer becomes your base, your essence, then there is freedom. Because curiously, to colloquialise it again, after I met that geezer Adnat Swami and I went to my mate, I met this geezer, it was weird, right? And I goes, I couldn't imagine there's anything you could say to him that would knock him off his and my mate went like, yeah, what if you went, mate, there's some skinheads fucking up your car? And we're like, what? Oh no! Like, wouldn't, like, there's nothing you could say, or like, I think, do you want to be in our band? He wouldn't go, oh yeah, all right. You know, like there's nothing. There is nothing to get. There is nothing to lose.
Yeah.
So it's I'm really into it. The other thing is, though, with Amma, the hugging saint, who I also feel like she emanates great wisdom, and her followers think that, you know, they're very in like that Hindu, as you know better than me, like they're much more idolatry based. So they're saying this woman is an incarnation of Kali or some, you know, they're saying she's God.
Yeah.
Now, like, I was watching her, and she's amazing and powerful and visibly going into transcendent states and stuff like that. But there was this night, right? It was New Year's Eve, and there was like 10,000 of her followers hanging out and, like, you know, sort of this big party and chanting. It was cool. And she's up, you know, enthroned and stuff. There was a bit where someone, a musician, like messed up something or another, and she just went, "Oi, sort that thing out," like in whatever Southern Indian language she speaks. She went, "Sort that thing out." And I thought, oh, she's still interacting with the material world. This is why I wonder, you know, sort of say in Christianity, and Christ says, like, you know, in the world, but not of it. Yeah. What do you feel, Andy, about perennialism? What do you feel about identifiable truths that appear in many, if not all, spiritual traditions?
So again, I think that the more that we rely on words and concepts, the further we move away from truth. So the challenge always, I think, with these great teachers is that there's always an essence there, and there's, you know, it's often talked about as sort of mystical schools, but I just think there's an essence, and the essence is awareness and compassion. For what, I can't find other words, but it's called by many names. But, you know, for the sake of this, let's call it that. I feel like that's at the heart of every lineage, every tradition, every faith, every tradition, and I just feel that the further it kind of moves outwards, and as it moves out into society, the less and less it has to do with the essence, and the more and more it has to do with a structure, often a structure reliant on, you know, the power and government and all kinds of other kind of factors that start to play into it. So all of a sudden, like, the essence is lost, and so people are doing things and going through the motions of things and not even really kind of necessarily knowing what they're doing or why they're doing, or even having the benefit of experiencing the essence of that kind of practice. So, and that's obviously kind of very general and broad, and it's not true in every case, but I see it a lot. And I saw it in Asian countries as well. Like, often there's this, you know, in the West we're like this, in the East. I mean, I saw that in just as much in Asian countries as I did in the West.
And even in your monastic experience, you said, you know, there's get up at this time, eat this.
Yeah.
So, but when we discussed it before, it was more like, look, let's eliminate as much as possible all the ephemera of everyday affairs, so you can focus on awareness and compassion, cultivating these qualities. Yeah. But that itself is a form of structure, but it is in evidence that we go from Christ, the idea of Christ of, like, you know, abandon your possessions and follow me, don't get caught up in material world, love is everything, don't judge nobody, to, right, I'm going to need cathedrals.
Yeah.
Like, it's a sort of, it becomes materialized, institutionalized, and that is not about this essence, is it?
No, and that's what really moved me. And look, it's absolutely the same in all mystical schools, whether it's Christianity or Sufism of Islam. Like, you can find it in all the great traditions. But what really inspired me, you know, were the great yogis of Tibet. You know, they eschewed all that stuff. They didn't want anything to do with any kind of, not even the monasteries. They would just go to a cave in the mountains and they'd brick it up, and they'd have a little hole in one corner where they pass their waste out of. They'd have a little hole in the other corner where someone would come along every now and again and put some food inside, and they would live their lives there. And it was it was free from all that kind of other stuff. And whilst on the one hand, it's not very kind of practical, I think on the other hand, it created an environment where the focus and the intention was on the essence and the cultivation of the essence and the continuance of the essence through the ages, rather than trying to create these great establishments that maybe kind of didn't necessarily kind of have the focus and intention on the essence.
No, they're social structures, and social structures tend to, the magnetism seems to be towards power.
Yeah.
We talked before about sort of polarity and concepts such as positive and negative, and even these you eschew. Even these.
Well, I think from a meditation point of view, they're really challenging. So most of us will have a relationship with the mind where we kind of, or with thoughts, where we see some thoughts as positive and we see some thoughts as negative. So in doing that, we've already created a framework for tension and stress.
Yeah.
If positive thoughts come up, we want to hold on to them, or we want to chase after them. And if they look like they're going away, we get a little bit kind of nervous. Or we desire them so much that we chase after them. So we're caught up in that. If a negative thought comes up, we don't like it. Maybe we experience fear, or we're very resistant to it. So we're then kind of pushing against the thought. But when and you'll know, I'm sure you know this from your own meditation, when you step back just a little bit, a thought is a thought. And if we don't engage with it, if we're able to kind of maintain that place, that seat of awareness, where we simply witness a thought coming and going, it's a thought. It's neither good nor bad. It only becomes good or bad once we start to think about it in a certain way, and once we start to have a relationship with it and to engage with it and to create a storyline around it. Then it becomes problematic. But a thought in and of itself is neither positive or negative.
In a way, thought is the first layer of the material world. It's an object.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, there's a lot of different ways of looking at it, but I feel like that's normally the first place where we kind of get a bit caught up and where we start to experience suffering and stress in our life.
Because even though, I've been meditating 7 years, transcendental meditation, I've been listening to Headspace, and I'm listening to the beginner's bit, right? Because it's free. I don't know why it's sort of so hard to put a credit card number into something. Oh God, no! It feels like a real commitment. But even though when I'm listening to them 10-minute ones, I'm like, bloody hell, this is for proper beginners. Like I'd recommend to mates of mine who are out sort of doing driveways and that. Go, look, listen to this. This will help you with your meditation. But me, I've been meditating all this time, and I still going, right, maybe you've wandered off now. Just return back to the awareness of the rising and falling. But I'm thinking, bloody hell, I am just sat here thinking again.
Yeah.
It's sort of it's astonishing, this habit of the mind.
Yeah. It's incredible, right? It's so ingrained, and it's there's this sometimes this idea that friends will say, or people who meditate will say, oh yeah, you went away and you did it for kind of so long. Well, kind of so what, in a way. Doesn't mean that I no longer experience distraction of the mind. I think it is a practice, and I really believe that none of us really kind of master this stuff. Maybe the odd few people, the people we've been chatting about today. But I feel like it's a lifelong practice. It's a journey for life, and we're all students. We are always a student. And if we ever lose that sense of not being a student, then we've lost that sense of freshness and curiosity and openness and beginner's mind, which I feel is so important in meditation. If we're not turning up with that, then it's just a routine. We're just kind of going through the motions.
When you were saying that thing about little kids being, taken off like they're maybe 7 years old, they're 11 years old, it just seems extraordinary as a person that's grown up in the culture that I have, that would even be an option. But I suppose, you think about it with football, you'd take off a 6-year-old and they'd go off in some football academy. But the idea that an 11-year-old would be capable of that.
Yeah.
And it shows you how much cultural experience is informing the world. Notable too, I think, Andy, that fear and desire, the constant triggers to action, are so prevalent culturally that the news is promoting fear, that commerce runs on desire, that these animalistic states are perpetuated, that we need an alternative, if not oppositional, force and ideology, because the magnetism is powerful. The magnetism of the alternative is powerful.
Yeah, I guess it depends how we, and again, different viewpoints on it, but how we approach that. So if there's one idea, do we try and do we try? I think very often you'll see one idea, and you see this in American politics right now. Like there's one idea presented, and then the other side they just shout a little bit, kind of louder, and then this side shouts louder, and then this side, till eventually they're kind of there's so much kind of conflict, and I guess there are different ways of coming at it, and arguably the way of creating that alternative kind of route is, rather than by trying to overthrow that in a kind of a physical or energetic kind of way, more kind of not engaging perhaps, and creating an environment where that can't exist. Like, because if all of us are living an open, present, compassionate kind of life, no one's going to vote for that.
Yes.
So we enable. I feel like the society enables that behaviour. It doesn't necessarily, it's not necessary, we're not necessarily slaves to it. We are kind of part of that, and each and every one of us has a responsibility to sort of, to be more present perhaps and not engage in it.
I think that's beautiful. I've heard that idea from various different sources, even like quite anarchists and quite political people, and people that are sort of progressive syndicalists, like ideas of setting up societies that are independent, saying that don't engage in oppositionism, simply establish alternatives and live in it. And when I think about them two boys that I was talking to yesterday, or young men, like I think they're not going to want to, like, if you give them like, right, here is a system, here is an alternative system, like where we can live in the world, and we admit that this is a world with material in it, with consuming in it, with where we are human and we're frail and we're flawed. We don't have to live in the extremist state that we're currently being offered.
And I think we even see that inside our own mind, right? We almost fan the flames when we provide a lot of opposition or a lot of conflict. Like it keeps the thing alive. So I worry sometimes that if the more we kind of push in one direction, actually the more sort of tension we create kind of coming back towards us. It's a bit like Aikido or something, if the force is coming towards you, rather than push against it, just move to the side, let it go past. There's something interesting in that kind of movement.
Yeah, it feels like we plug into it. I think about bumper cars quite often, that we're these vehicles that have an aerial and it goes into the grid of negativity and anger. And if we just sort of unplug from that, then you're not being sourced by it in the same way.
And I do think we can live in the world, but choose not to be a part of that kind of thinking.
I agree. Can I run through some of these questions that Gareth done, just so
Please.
we make sure that everything's covered? Are you still in touch with teachers in Tibet, like your guru and that? And who is your guru? And do you still study with them?
I'm very much still in touch with them. We were chatting just beforehand. I showed you a picture of. It was really nice. I had one of the abbots from the Tibetan monasteries, my old retreat master. He came out and visited.
What's his name, may I ask?
He's Lama Yeshe Rinpoche.
Oh, cool. You've got one of them Rinpoche names.
Yes, which is normally.
I'm always impressed when I see them on a book.
It's quite high up. Those guys, they've done their time.
Yeah, he ain't playing.
He's not playing. It was amazing actually. I was so.
They proud of you, or they love you? They're happy, or how do you?
They seem really happy, and I was genuinely. That's probably one of the most magical, special times for me personally, kind of in the whole Headspace journey, is having him come out here. He spent a day with the whole team, kind of our annual retreat, and sort of, not that it was his stamp of approval, but him coming out here, it kind of felt like, wow, like that was really kind of meaningful, because it, there is always the concern when you're trying to present something that has been so carefully kind of looked after, that's kind of travelled so many centuries, of messing with it, and it's something I really care about. It's probably the thing I care about most. And so him coming out here and kind of saying this is really kind of good for the world, that meant a huge amount.
That's beautiful, isn't it? Because that's one of the great challenges, is how do we transfer it? People obviously can't see, but you did it as if you were carrying a baby bird.
Yeah,
like you've got to carry this thing. It's going to go in the world.
It's precious, and I think it's really easy to lose, again, 2,500 years of R&D. Like,
what's that, R&D?
It's sort of research development, kind of, I feel like it'd be so easy to lose the efficacy and all the time and attention and precision that's gone into that over countless lifetimes. And so I don't want to be the person that messes that up,
Buddha come up with this thing under a tree, then Andy ruined it. No, God, what? So is it that what is it that what is the teaching of Buddha? I know that's quite a big question to come up with at the end. Could you just sum that up, please, Andy? No, because this is it's Buddhism, this headspace.
Look, I genuinely, even as a Buddhist monk, I didn't self-identify as Buddhist.
You were deluded, mate. You were there in a monastery, wrapped in a blanket. What do you think you was, a Hell's Angel? Probably that's what you're going to do after the circus.
I just
don't call it that. It's not helpful.
I just think that the whole idea of meditation is letting go of labels and identity. So it's kind of ironic we would then kind of take on and adopt the label of being a Buddhist or a Hindu or whatever it kind of might be. So I personally didn't find that a terribly helpful way of thinking. Definitely, I personally, obviously I practiced those teachings for a very long time. They're very much kind of a part of my life, and they absolutely 100% influence kind of the content, and are responsible for the content that's in the app. But I don't think about it as Buddhist. We talked just now about the essence that is alive in every great tradition and every great culture. I feel like it is the delivery of the essence.
Yeah.
So it's the chocolate without the wrapper.
Yes. Because you imagine that if Jesus, Muhammad, and Buddha met, they wouldn't have a fight, would they? And go, no, fuck you.
It's hard
They'd go, it's the same thing.
It's hard to imagine. I'd quite like to be at that dinner, though. It's,
yeah. Would they talk? I mean, I wonder. Yeah, ultimately, you're right. The labels, people get hung up on the labels. People get hung up on the denominations. But I suppose, coming from a Hindu tradition, the transformation of Buddhism was what exactly? That's still a big question, isn't it? But was it suffering and desire? Watch out for that crap.
Yeah, I a little bit of that. I think that that recognizing that.
Because I'm trying to work out, is it what happened to that man under that tree?
Yeah.
Relevant to me now? And it feels like it is.
I think
what I know.
Yeah, because I think they're timeless. I think they're universal, and it's really interesting. You were talking about kind of attraction to the flesh and all those kind of things. Even if you read those stories, it's not like he was there and he was experiencing this perfect mind, and there were no thoughts of desire or lust or greed or desire. All of that stuff was there.
He was tempted, wasn't he, in all sorts of forms and figures
and
come at him.
He was picturing kind of beautiful naked women, and I don't feel like that's really such a kind of great leap away from where we are in most of us in our lives. It's just there was such a kind of a commitment to an intention to see those for what they were, simply as thoughts and not real and not permanent and not tangible. And in having that relationship and that perspective with his mind, with his thoughts, there was a release, and therefore a permanent, at some stage, a complete freedom from the suffering of kind of our thinking mind.
Yes, is there some beautiful, beautiful stories? I felt like I said to you, mate, when I left my wife and daughter, not permanently, but abandoned the family, just for a minute while I did this at Abbot Kinney and wandered around here. On the short walk, I felt like the thought occurred: I am already dead. You are already dead. Everything that happens to you is meaningless now. You're dead already.
Is that a thought you get often?
No, not really. But I get I get versions of I think it exists to mitigate the thought that there's something to acquire, to attain. I'm very much a person I'm objective fixated.
Yeah.
I think, I must do this, I must get that. Because even when you sort of that, when people talk about enlightenment, because I took psychedelics when I was younger, I recognise it because I've shortcutted it sometimes. When you get that feeling of self-immolation and the idea of oh my God, I'm not real. I remember I was a 16-year-old kid. I took acid with just lads from, as it turned out, Yorkshire, tripping, and and I remember sort of going, oh my God, I'm not a person, and I remember realising it and feeling it, and it's terrifying because we don't have any tradition. There's nothing to tell you that. There's no one's going, all right, this is just this temporary thing you're going to be doing for a brief while.
Yeah.
So Yeah, those thoughts occur to me and have always occurred to me. And I've always I've found something in me that does make me think that past life or some version of that or interconnected consciousness in some form may be a deal. Because,
Yeah.
like, often things seem familiar. Often
Right.
things seem attractive to me in ways that, like you spoke of your own instinct, your own intuition.
Yeah.
You decided at some point, I'm off here to
Yeah.
go to the Himalayas. Like, what's that? Oh, I'm going to go and study with this guy.
Yeah.
Who is that? Who's that that's speaking? Who
Yeah.
is me? And like Adam Curtis, one of the early guests on this podcast, goes, the problem of our time now is there's someone in our head, the Pink Floyd lyric, there's someone in my head and it's
Yeah.
not me. There's someone talking inside your own mind and that's not who you are. So
Yeah.
I've got to do this. I'm going to buy that. I'm going to have a fight. I'm going to have sex. Like it's, you've become identified, commodified, conditioned, trained to behave in a way that you're now completely detached from this essence that you talk about, this awareness and compassion. People have no relationship with it anymore, don't know that it's there.
And that's the interesting thing for me. I think and I agree, the risk is that we think that it's elsewhere. If we think it's not there or not here, then we might start to think that it exists elsewhere. And I would contend that actually it is here and it is with each and every one of us all of the time. It's never anywhere else. It's just that maybe we don't have a sense of connection with it or we don't have a familiarity with it. And I feel that's the struggle when a lot of people come to meditation. Rather than kind of allowing sort of the clouds to pass to experience the blue sky, there's more of a sense of, okay, right, I've got to experience blue sky. How do I push all those clouds out of the way and how do I kind of create this space? Like what I think meditation is rather than just allowing a natural process to unfold. So I despite, whatever's going on in the world and whatever people are doing and saying, I think for all of us, this is something I find really kind of useful, is knowing that, look, awareness and compassion is still there. For whatever reason, the circumstances, the conditioning, the environment has not necessarily allowed that to shine through, but it is there and it's there in each and every one of us. I really sort of profoundly kind of believe that's the case.
Clearly. Can we conclude with some meditation? There are other questions, but they're not as interesting as the idea of us. They're great questions, Gareth. Don't be hurt. Like they've got can we conclude with a meditation? We do a bit of thing.
Yeah, if you'd like to.
Oh, nice one. Yeah.
Couple of minutes, good or
a couple of minutes.
Great.
I mean, you're the bloody expert.
I'm really not.
Can't let me decide.
I'm
we end up doing coke.
I don't think that's ever been ever been done in this particular room.
It won't help us.
Okay. So, look, whether it's just us or if it's anyone who wants to kind of join in when they're listening to this, just general bit of advice: just make sure that you're sitting comfortable and you're not going to be disturbed for just a couple of minutes. Doesn't matter if there's a bit of noise going on in the background, but just take a moment always when you first sit down, just to ground the body. So just feel the weight of the body against the chair or the floor beneath you, soles of the feet on the floor, and the weight of the hands and the arms just resting on the legs. And you can start off with your eyes open, eyes closed, whatever feels kind of more comfortable. But if you have your eyes open, just try if you can, rather than to focus on one particular point, just have a nice kind of spacious, relaxed focus that sort of just takes in the entire sort of space around you. So you can't really see any one thing in focus, you just see everything around you. And just maintaining that soft focus, just take a couple of big deep breaths. So just breathing in through the nose. And out through the mouth. Just one more time, breathing in through the nose. And out through the mouth. And as you breathe out this time, just gently closing the eyes. And just feeling that weight again. Pressing down. Allow any thoughts to just come and go. The mind's going to continue to think. Don't try to stop any thoughts. Just bringing the attention into the body. And just noticing how the body feels. Is there a sense of heaviness or lightness in the body? Does it feel like there's a sense of stillness or restlessness in the body? We're not trying to change anything, just noticing the feeling, the sensation. And as you sit there, just starting to notice how the body's breathing. So again, we're not trying to breathe in any special way. Sometimes the breath will be quick, sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's deep, sometimes it's shallow. Just let it do its own thing. And to begin with, just noticing where in the body you feel that movement. Might be the stomach, might be the chest. If you can't feel anything, just gently placing your hand on the stomach, just to feel that movement. And as you follow the breath, just to help to remain focused on that feeling, that sensation, just starting to count the breaths just silently to yourself. So as you feel the rising sensation, you count 1. Falling sensation 2. And 3, and 4, just up to a count of 10. And just starting again at 1. Just try that a couple of times through on your own. So for sure at some stage the mind's going to get distracted. As soon as you realise the mind's wandered, just gently acknowledging it, letting the thought go, and then just coming back to the breath. And just for a moment, letting go now of even any focus on the breath. So just letting the mind for a few seconds do whatever it wants to do. If it wants to think, let it think. Just allowing the mind to be free. And then just gently bringing the attention back into the body. Just coming back to that feeling of contact, of weight. Coming back into the space around you, any sounds, sensations. And then when you're ready, just gently opening the eyes again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, that was good because it was mad to open my eyes and like you were there.
Yeah.
I was up in. Oh, hello.
I'm there all the time. I'm there every time.
It's like Man Flip, getting the cartoon guys in here as well. And that was amazing. Thank you very much. I like the idea that it is always there. The awareness and compassion is always there, obfuscated only by mental static and external attachment, which can be overcome with the learning of these techniques. Well done in your incredible work in
big team effort,
bringing it.
man.
Yeah,
Really.
no, yeah,
Big,
yeah.
huge team
Absolutely.
effort.
No, you've been very clear that you work with a great many people and that you're part of a lineage in in both directions, laterally and back through time. Hopefully forwards as well.
Yeah, hopefully.
Unless it's you that's finally ruined Buddhism.
I mean, there's a good chance, but we'll see what happens.
Between us, we can destroy all religions. So there's nothing left but blobs of
So you
material.
do the Hindu thing, I'll do the Buddha, and then we'll branch out. We'll branch out.
I'll do Christianity and Hinduism. Islam we'll leave. Let's not get involved with that. All right, hey, nice one.
Thanks, right? It's an honour. I mean,
Yeah,
thanks so much
that
for
was
having
beautiful.
me on, man.
Thank you.
It's
Thanks
a
for
real
letting us
pleasure.
record it in your studio. So, yeah, download Headspace, learn to meditate, free yourself. Cheers, mate.
Thanks, man.
Nice one.
Thank you.